Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipson. Welcome to episode 164 of Sports Management Podcast. Today's guest is Elena Mirandola, the newly appointed CEO of F.C. Como Women. F.C. Como is the first club in Mercury 13's portfolio, and they are playing in the Italian Serie A Femminile. We spoke about being appointed CEO of F.C. Como, treating women's football as a business, F.C. Como's partnership with Nike, female empowerment, her best advice for young people in sports, her vision for F.C. Como, and much more. Elena Mirandola, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's really exciting to have you here on the show. It's fresh news. You are the new CEO of FC Como Women, women's club in the Women's Serie A. So can you talk a little bit about the role and what will be expected of you, and also a little bit about the club?
Sure. So first of all, as you rightly explained, Como Women is a football club which is competing in Serie A Femminile. This is our second year in Serie A Femminile. And I think the peculiarity of the club is that we are solely a female football club. So I like to say we don't depend on the male team, because as we know, there is a very tight relationship between the male and the female football clubs and football teams, but we are completely independent. I would say our goal is obviously to perform well in the Campionato, which is starting on September 1st, but we also have, I would say, even deeper goal, which is really promoting and elevating female football in the world and in Italy, of course.
And I know that female empowerment, gender equality is something that is dear to you. And as you said, that this is a female-only club. So how do you feel like FC Como can help push female empowerment and gender equality?
Sure. So our goal is to basically build a playbook, both from a sporting, but also from a commercial and a marketing perspective. So something that is, unique in this field and something that can become a best practice in the future. What we do, from a sporting perspective, is to ensure the athletes have all the support they need to really excel and elevate their performance. And as we know, even, physical and physiologically, female athletes have different needs. So everything we do from a training perspective, gym, equipment, etc., it's really aimed for their excellence and the improvement in their performance. On the other hand, from a commercial, from a marketing standpoint, we're also looking at, different ways beyond just the traditional way of partnering and sponsoring with brands. We believe, in what we call value-aligned partnerships. So it's not just about, getting a brand on board, but we want to partner with brands that understand what's the trajectory of this project, and most importantly, want to invest, in the growth of female football, but really believe in the cause and believe that together we can work to elevate female sport.
So what are some of these values, except for obviously supporting women's football, but what are some other values that you look for in a commercial partner?
Yes. I think, first of all, obviously, we have a peculiar audience. We have a female audience. So to some extent, any brands that are interested in tapping also into this audience, it would be super relevant for them. Our values are, that we play with heart and humility. So we're also looking at brands that, really embrace these values, but at the same time, also brands that believe in resilience, in the possibilities of women football. So, we're actually talking to a few large brands, and typically what we see interest coming from is, from their foundations, or also, the ESG side of things. So I think it's very clear to everyone that we are not just building a commercial model, but we are also driving or being catalysts of a certain movement. So this is kind of, the type of partners that we are looking for at the minute.
That's interesting. And I read very recently that you have announced a multi-year deal with Nike as well.
That's right, yes. Yeah, that's a further confirmation of the type of partners that we want. I mean, it's no secret Nike has been very active in the last few years on promoting women football, but more in general, female sports. And so that's exactly the type of partner we want, someone that understands what we are building and is willing to contribute, and we can join forces together.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned that you want to be independent and don't depend on a men's team because there are many huge clubs with women's team, and then maybe the majority of the revenue comes from the men's side. So you said that you wanted to build a playbook. So is this something that you think that if you're doing this really great, that more female-only football clubs can follow your model?
So we know that there are other, I mean, in Serie A right now, it's Como Women, and then there is another team which is fully independent. But there are other teams in Serie B, for example, which is the second league in Italy, which are independent. Or there are also, other smaller independent clubs out there. So the idea is really to be a best practice for them, paving the way and showing what it's possible. Obviously, we are talking about Italy. I'm myself Italian, and I know that, football in Italy is strongly rooted into our culture, but it's very, if you close your eyes and think football, you probably think of a boy, right? That's what come up in your mind. So I think in Italy, there is a lot of work to do, but we're also looking beyond, also because, as you know, our ownership is international and they are building an international network, a portfolio of female-only clubs. So the idea is to build this playbook, but also to be replicated beyond just Italy and be an example for teams that are in Europe as well, for example. I mean, we know US is a different story. They are way more advanced than us from this perspective, but in Europe, there is still, more that can be done, especially more emerging markets.
Yes, of course. US is a different beast.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned your ownership group there, so Mercury 13. Can you talk a little bit about how the process have been when you started now, like talking to them, and how is the cooperation with the ownership group?
Sure. So the club was acquired, so a major stake was acquired in March by Mercury 13. I like to say a little bit about the story behind the club. The club was actually funded by a local entrepreneur from Como, who really believed in women football. I think he was a super visionary considering, the times, especially 2 years ago when he started. There were actually a lot of ups and downs because he launched the whole thing when COVID hit. So when I actually met him, he was like, it was a total nightmare. We didn't expect COVID to happen, etc. So he's really been running this club in a very entrepreneurial way, but really focusing on the values of this club. And then, in March, Mercury took over. And when I talked to him and I asked him, why did you, sell the club to Mercury? And he said, because we were really aligned in the vision and in the values that, Mercury want to bring to this club. So I think it really started again, we talked before about value aligned partnerships, but it really started as a value aligned project. I came on board. I mean, last week was my first day. And I have to say, I've been behind the scene prior to the joining date anyway, because as you can imagine, there is a lot to do. But I remember very well when I saw the post on LinkedIn for the role, because that's how I got the job. I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. I really want to be part of it. And when I spoke with Victoire and Mario, who are the two co-founders of Mercury, I thought, I love these guys. I really want to be part of this. So I felt very connected to the project since the day one, since the first time that I talk to them.
And as I understood it, it was a lot of applicants. So what did you think in your qualities was the ones that stuck out and that in the end they chose you for this position?
I can give you my opinion. I hope it's something they would agree upon. Look, this is a business. We talk about elevating women football, but at the same time, I think that an important message we want to pass is this is a business. This is not a charity. So I bring almost 20 years of business experience. I've been managing team. I've been very involved on commercial and marketing projects. And myself, I come from the digital media background. So as we know, a lot of clubs are now transitioning into, I would say, almost like a media content, like a content creator hub. So my experience definitely, I want to think adds value to the team from that perspective. But most importantly, my business skills is what was most valued. I think coming from sport industry, it's not necessary anymore because, as I mentioned, there is an evolution, and football clubs are becoming proper businesses. And there is a lot of effort into innovation as well. So coming in with a different perspective, not coming myself from a sport background, bring new ideas, and not just myself, by the way. We have a creative director who comes from the fashion world, for example. We have, people coming from different backgrounds. So I think it's a melting pot of experiences, and this is really what can help us innovate as well, because we have to think out of the box here, right? So I think, we really need these different angles and perspectives.
I am a big believer of bringing in knowledge from different sectors and different, getting a different view. And obviously, Mario and Victor, they are really smart people. And as you said, like almost all companies are marketing companies. They are content creating companies. And you mentioned the designer. Now you're selling apparel, merchandise, the jerseys. So taking in all of these different skill sets, obviously together builds a great unity.
Definitely. And most importantly, even if we are a resilient and strong team, we don't want to sacrifice aesthetics. So as you've probably seen from our last photo shooting with Nike, we also want to give the players the opportunity to wear beautiful kits, beautiful jerseys. So in a way, this intersection between aesthetically beautiful, but also physically strong is and resilient is what we are looking for. It doesn't mean that if you are a football player, then you only have to wear, scrappy things. It's, we really believe in this intersection. And that's also why having someone coming from the fashion business is useful.
Yes. And probably also, tailored for women. Like back in the days, I guess that they were used a standard jersey and they didn't fit to the women figure as well as the male one and so forth. So now you're, really making for the women.
Definitely. Yes. It's all about them. It all revolves around them.
You are new to the role, but I guess that you have a vision and looking forward. So in a few years, if you look ahead in the crystal ball, how do you see the FC Como and how would you define success? Like in 5 years, if we have achieved X, Y, Z, then you would be really happy.
So I'm a strong believer that we will see big differences in awareness level in women football in the next couple of years. And so I always tell the team, it's not a long-term vision, it's a medium-term vision. We're not talking 10 years from now, we're talking 2 to 3 years from now. We have, this ambition to increase awareness. This is, I think, the one of the key goals. Football can get into a vicious cycle, which is a little bit what has happened up to this point. So, low awareness attracts very few sponsors, low broadcasting revenues, and merchandise doesn't get sold. So this is exactly what we want to change and revolutionize. We want to essentially set up a virtuous cycle where we are raising awareness. At the same time, more sponsors want to come on board. There are more revenue streams coming in because, as I said at the beginning, this is not a charity. We are here to do business. And this is what would really prove that women football can be self-sustainable, right? So I come from a very, data-driven background. And so that is my vision. At the same time, there are really, KPIs that we can use to monitor whether or not we're going in the right direction. So, really simply from our fan base growth, looking at all of the digital platforms. I mean, we have seen now, for example, in the last week, the team was telling me we had a 10% growth in our fan base on Instagram just by doing and leveraging on the right marketing strategy. So I think measuring these KPIs will help us understand if we are heading in the right direction. At the same time, again, coming from a more of a business background, I really like to measure very tightly all of the business KPIs. So, how we're tracking against our cost, revenue coming in. Again, it's a business. So we have obviously made some bets. We are making some bets, but at the same time, I think using the data to define whether or not we're going into the right direction is key.
That's really interesting. And I like the business perspective, obviously. And as you said, you come from a business background. If we look on the other side, because you mentioned in the beginning also that you need to give the players the right circumstances or so that they can perform well. The season starts in about a week, I think, now for you guys. So if we put the business aside, are there any performance goals on the pitch? This is the second year you said in Serie A, so any performance goal like winning the league in X years or something similar?
Yeah, so I can tell you that from a sporting perspective, what we are looking to do this year is to be annoying for the top 5 clubs. So I don't want to, say we want to get in this position of the, of the Campionato, but definitely, we have a very strong technical team. We have a mister coming from Serie C, the main one. He's very, very good. We know he's going to really elevate the performance of the whole team. We have a trainer that comes from many, many years of experience of only training female athletes. So we are very confident with the technical team. We think really we have a chance to be, as I said, the annoying club that will be bothering the top 5.
That's exciting. And I was talking a lot about that with Arianna Criscioni in a previous episode about giving the players what they need in order to perform. And as we spoke about before, that women are different from men and they might need different things. And everywhere from shoes, because feet are built different, or how you do your practice, because how the women's bodies differ from men. Maybe you cannot do the same type of gym session. Maybe you need to make it a little bit different to maximize performance.
But it's also personality wise, it's, girls are different. They react differently. I was actually talking to the technical staff a couple of days ago, and they told me it's very different compared to men. You tell the girls, like, you should make this change. You should try, with this new technique or something. They would pick it up straight away. But maybe, there are other personality aspects that are, again, different from the men. So you have to know how to adjust basically to their way of reacting. I'm an athlete myself. I'm not a professional athlete, but I'm an athlete myself. And I can really see the difference when I have to go to a race. For me, compared to my male friends, they have a totally different way of approaching also, stress, competition. It's very different. So there is a personality angle as well, which cannot be neglected. It's not just physical.
I haven't thought about that. That's an interesting angle. And you mentioned that you're an athlete yourself. If I did my research correctly, it's triathlons.
That's right. Yes.
So how did you get into triathlons?
Well, it's a complicated sport, because for those who don't know, it involves swimming, cycling, and running. So there are different distances that you can compete in. I usually compete in what's defined as Olympic distance and middle distance. So the middle distance is 1.9 kilometer swim, 90 kilometer bike, and 21 kilometer run. So it's a half marathon. So basically you have to train during the week on all of the 3 different disciplines. You also have to do, there are days when you have to train on 2 disciplines in the same day because of, just preparing your legs on switching from one sport to another. I got into this in a very stupid way because a friend started me. So she also was a triathlete. And once she told me, why don't you come with me to do this 50K ride? This was back in Dubai when I was living in Dubai. And I was like, 50-kilometer bike ride, you're crazy. I would never be able to do that. This was about 10 years ago. So I went and I loved it. So I decided to buy a road bike. And I actually decided to buy a nice one because I thought if I'm going to spend a lot of money on it, then I'm going to use it and there will be no excuses. And then a couple of years later, when I moved to Asia, I was traveling a lot and I couldn't obviously, train on a bike every day. because I was in Hong Kong, in Singapore, I was always on the go. And so I decided to start running because it was just logistically easy. And so I started to do some duathlon races because a friend of mine told me, there are these competitions where you run, bike and run. Why don't you join? And I said, okay, let's do it. And then I really got, passionate. But there are not that many duathlon races. So typically there are triathlon races, which involve also swimming. And I've never been a great swimmer. Actually, it's my least preferred sport. So I started to train for swimming as well. And that's, how I got where I am now. I mean, again, I'm not a professional. I'm a very amatorial triathlete, but it has taught me a lot of things. It's really not about sport. It's about how you build a certain mindset, how you learn how to deal with challenges. Something that has really taught me is basically to break down a long goal into smaller goals. When you start a race, like a middle distance triathlon Ironman race, you probably have, let's say, 5 hours ahead of you of sport. And if you think about it, it's scary. But then, if you really break down the whole race into smaller chunks, this is really what helps you digesting the effort, the 5 hours or 5 hours and a half effort. And I apply this to life as well and to business, because if you think about, where you want to be in 2 years' time, but how do you get there? How do you break it down into smaller chunks? And how do you also tap yourself on the back when you do something well? So I think that's super important. At least for me, has been really useful.
Definitely. I'm a true believer that sport skills learned in sports can transfer into business. And as you said, like making goals, mindset, overcoming adversity, all of this that you experience during a triathlon race can be implemented in a business setting as well.
Definitely. And actually, as the football club, we also have the youth academy. So we start training the girls from 6 years old. So I think with this initiative, we can really start changing the mindset from the very young age. Because obviously, now we have been talking about the first team, the campionato, etc. But it all starts from when they're very young. And I think also educating the families that if, as a girl, you like football, you can actually do it. And there is a platform where you can do it. That's super powerful as well.
That's amazing. To play on a women's team and a girls' team, not to maybe have to play with the boys because there aren't a girls' team in your area.
Actually, one of our players, she's now 36, so she's not one of the youngest players. So when she started playing football was probably, 30 years ago. And I learned that her dad actually set up a football club, female football club in Florence, just so she could play, because otherwise she had to play with the boys. So, most of the times, I think in the past, it was a dad's effort to make their daughters happy and then set up these, platforms for them to play. So, I think we have come a long way.
Yeah, definitely. And great to have the girls team and the grassroots to be able to maybe in the future also to build from below, to take up a talent that has been in the club over several years and can then transfer into the A team.
Absolutely. I mean, it's obviously it's an initiative with a good purpose, but at the same time, it's also a commercial and a strategic move. So I think there are different reasons why this is a good idea and it's worth pursuing.
Of course, from a business perspective, it's more expensive to buy a player from outside than to bring someone from your own club.
Definitely.
Has there been any bumps on the road in your business career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Well, many, for sure. It would have been too easy. Well, there is something that I've learned a few years ago, and I think has been an invaluable learning for me, which is basically try not to do too many things at the same time. A few years ago, I moved to Asia on behalf of the company I was working for. And basically, I was in charge of setting up multiple offices in Asia. And in 1 year, I started 4 offices. It was too much, not just from my perspective, but just in general, I think doing too many things at the same time it's never a good thing. And learning how to prioritize, but also doing it in a sustainable way is super important. So this is definitely one lesson learned for me. Other bumps, most of the times, have also been related to, I was thinking something was right based on my gut, but then my rational mindset was telling me, no, that's not the right choice. If I had chosen to follow my gut, I think I would have been right, especially when it comes to choosing people. When you select people to work with you, I think, from, at least for me, I typically know in the first 5 minutes whether or not I want to work with this person or not. And, in some cases, then you think, yeah, I really like this person. But then at the same time, maybe, this person has a CV that doesn't really seem to make sense. But then I regretted it not choosing, this person. So I think following your gut, it's important, especially, the more experience you gain, and the more I think your gut can also point you to the right direction. I always think when there is a doubt, there is no doubt. So I try to also follow this as a rule in life.
I like that. And going back to what you said the first day with the multitasking, that I feel is something that the perception of that has changed over the years. Because a couple of years back, I felt like a skill like you put on your CV was that I'm a multitasker. I can do many things at the same time. While now studies have shown also that you can't actually put, your focus on too many things at the same time. And it's better to, as you said, prioritize and do first I do this task, then I move to the second task instead of doing them at the same time back and forth, because it will not be as good.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think also it's easy sometimes to be dragged into things, and because everything seems to be important. I think taking ownership of your own time is the most important thing, especially for a leader. So really making sure no one is dragging you into activities that don't move the needle. For me, for example, in these first weeks, I'm really focusing on what makes a difference, what moves the needle, and I'm building my action plan based on that. There are tons of things, as you can imagine, that we could be doing at the minute. We have a lot of inputs from inside, from outside, but the most difficult thing is to choose the one thing that you want to do well, and really like taking ownership of your own time, making sure you plan also your week around what really matters rather than just doing 10,000 things. But I think, like you rightly said, it's a bit of a change in leadership style. Before it was all about, doing a lot of things. Now it's doing the few things that move the needle. I like to think it that way.
Yeah, I agree. And I saw a graph not too long ago, and it was like, if something is important or urgent, and then you have, if it's important and urgent, then it needs to be done now, right away. If it's important but not urgent, maybe it can be outsourced. And then you try to, map out the different tasks you have to do and see how to manage them best.
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree.
For someone who has been in business for several years and now in sports, what would be your best advice for women who want to work in business or maybe even sports industry?
Okay. So I think thinking what are the transferable skills. Again, I don't come from a sport background myself, just from a passion perspective, not from a business perspective. But as I said at the beginning, my experience and some of my skills are relevant to the club. So really thinking about what are those transferable skills that would be interesting for clubs. Also really trying to understand what is the trajectory and the development of clubs these days. It's about building a marketing platform. It's about building also a digital platform. So all of these skills are going to be useful for clubs beside, the most typical roles that are more on the sporting side of things. There is also another interesting aspect, which is basically connecting with the younger generations. I think the football clubs will have to learn how to connect with the younger generations through the new media. I'm obviously, way too old to understand how, TikTok or other platforms work. And it's also not my job to do that. But I'm generally curious to understand how, 15 years old or 10 years old boys and girls connect now with brands. We know there are multiple, new innovative platforms, and I'm not talking social, or they could be social platforms, but gamification. So I think, if as a business professional, you have experience with this type of, new media, etc., this is also something that could be useful to clubs, right? And to brands most in general. So I think, really trying to think what are the transferable skills that can be useful to brands and to clubs. I think this is a good way to get into sport, business, and a football club, even if you don't really come from that area.
Definitely. And you're a proof of that, right? That you have built so much experience in different fields that now all together will put a lot of value into the sporting industry and FC Como.
Yeah, that's right.
It can be done.
It can be done, yes, for sure.
And I like to show that on the podcast through my guests, that you don't have to play sports, study sports management or business, and then you work in a sporting club. That there are several ways to get into the industry. Because like in your case, I think your bachelor's degree was in history, right?
That's right, yes.
And then worked in digital media, marketing, tech, and now in sports. So there are several, all roads lead to Rome, they say, right? So they can take different paths.
That's right. I also have to say I've been lucky, during my career, because I've almost always been working for consulting companies, digital consulting companies, which means you get a chance to work with a portfolio of companies. I think, by now I've probably worked with like maybe 50 of the largest brands in the world, from Emirates Airline to Nike to Estée Lauder. So also, for someone who want to get into sport, I think a good way would be to join an agency that works with a portfolio of companies and experiment. Maybe you realize you like working in the sport industry, or maybe you like working in the beauty industry. For example, in the agency that I used to work with before, we were producing content for Inter. It wasn't my client specifically, but I got exposure to that because it was also a client of the agency. So really, joining consulting companies is a good way to, especially for, I would say, for an entry-level position, to understand what you like, work on multiple projects, and then decide which path to take.
That's good advice. Is there something I haven't asked you yet that you feel is important to mention?
No, I think we've touched on all of the main aspects. Really, I think, and I know I've said this before, and I'm going to say once again, it's a business. So we're really here to build a business that can last. I think the next couple of years will be crucial, but at the same time, I think we should start seeing very soon a positive impact. We have seen already during the Olympics, there has been much more attention on female sport compared to the previous editions. So I think we are definitely heading in the right direction. But, I think the message has to be clear that we are here, to be self-sustainable and to do business.
So if there are some listeners now that they want to read up more, they want to follow the club, so we mentioned Instagram, social media, maybe also a website. How can they follow the club?
Yes. So we have right now, the website is a landing page because we are working on the new website, but it's launching in about 10 days. And it's beautiful, by the way. I'm not biased. It's really beautiful. So they can definitely follow through the website. And also we have a very active Instagram page, so they can follow there as well.
That's fantastic. The last question that I like to ask is if you know someone from your network that you think would be a good guest on this podcast.
So there is one person who is, by the way, an advisor at Mercury, who I think really impacted my decision to join this club. And his name is Luis Vicente. He is one of the key advisors of Mercury and comes from an amazing sport and commercial background. So I think if you want to, dig deeper into that aspect, he would be the perfect person.
Elena, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.